My sister-in-law disliked me for years and miscarried. We welcomed her back, but she claimed to be my child's mother. My hubby David and I married 8 years ago. We have Tom, our son. He's 4 and playful with a big imagination. Tom has always been close to me and is a mama's boy, which I don't mind because I know he'll have his own hobbies and may not want to spend as much time with me as a teenager. David and I are great collaborators, and we've mastered our routines for taking care of Tom and our careers. I felt I had a polite, communicative husband like David, which made this harmony possible. You think I have nothing to complain about on Reddit, right? Today I'm writing about my husband's sister, Kathy. I won't reveal my bias, but Kathy is very tough to get along with. Despite my long marriage to David, she has always been chilly to me. David told me at the start of our relationship that his parents would approve, but that his sister Kathy would interrogate me since she has always been protective of him. It turns out he was right. On our first night together, she asked me about my family, childhood, and brothers. No matter what I said, she was unimpressed and kept her nose up. She also randomly brought up David's exes and compared them to me as if it were normal. She encouraged David to join her and her girlfriends on a girls' trip during supper, saying he needed to clear his thoughts before getting serious. David saw me getting angry by this statement and told his sister to back off respectfully. My husband stands up to his sister, but because of his affection for her, he is not very strict about his boundaries. She thinks she can keep pushing the topic because she's the older sister, and only she wants what's best for him. Since our first dinner, I thought Kathy and I didn't like each other. It stung, but I wasn't going to try to make someone love and accept me if they already said no. Despite this, I was cordial to her when we met again, but she made it difficult. I immediately think of David's grandparents' anniversary party. Since David and I had been dating for a year, they invited the whole family and me as his +1. I appreciated how relaxed and nice his family was, as they would talk to me throughout the party. Kathy was the only one who didn't say hello. I observed that and avoided her. His grandparents urged everyone to come for a group photo today. Kathy loudly pointed me out and told me to go as we gathered. David raised his eyebrows when Kathy said that maybe he would break up with me and that she didn't want her brother Bimbo in this image. My face turned scarlet in embarrassment as everyone looked uncomfortable. Kathy interrupted David's argument by suggesting I was a stranger and shouldn't have gone to this gathering. I was mortified after hearing enough. David had attended several family occasions, and none of my family had treated him this way. Excuse me, I went inside to find my car keys. I didn't want to see her anymore. David and his dad rushed behind me to apologize. His mother tried to get me back with them, but it was too late. I heard David's grandparents yelling at Kathy, making me feel worse for ruining everyone's day. I left immediately and considered breaking up with David that night since I couldn't stand his sister. However, David apologized at my house with flowers and cake. He informed me that everyone blamed Kathy for being disrespectful to me, and that he had threatened to end things with her, which made her cry. He informed me he was tired of his sister's antics and didn't want anything to do with her. I felt reassured that he stuck up for me despite our long conversation. David kept his commitment in subsequent days. We stopped seeing Kathy, and he stopped answering her calls. He changed all his locks and urged his parents to talk to her so she could respect his privacy because she sometimes showed up at his house unannounced. Kathy had to accept that her brother didn't want her because his parents supported him. We believed this would make her regret her treatment of me, but it did the reverse. She called and texted me, threatening me and blaming me for everything. The cherry on top was when she demanded to meet me at work one day. Good thing my manager kicked her out, but I was shaken. I told David that I had to break up with him to escape his insane sister and sue her for harassing me. David cried and asked me to give him a chance to fix it. After convincing his parents, Mike and Kathy met at their house for their farewell talk. His parents realized what she was doing to me and told her they no longer wanted to keep in touch. David and his parents told Kathy that her behavior was borderline craziness and that they would support my choice to sue her. Somehow Kathy broke down and asked for help. She told them she was spiraling and couldn't stop. She also revealed that she had been unemployed for months, which had worsened her mental health. Fortunately, David's parents promptly admitted her to a psychiatric facility for intensive monitoring. Kathy ultimately accepted David's request to stop communicating. I thought her apologetic text was half-hearted, but I hoped she would heal. When David and I married, despite her discharge and success, we did not welcome Kathy. I avoided her, and everyone respected my wishes. I enjoyed her flowers greeting me on my joyful day. Kathy announced her wedding right after we returned from our honeymoon. No one knew she was dating anyone, but we were all happy for her until we found she was dating a guy she met in the psychiatric hospital. For complete context, this individual. Doctors diagnosed James as psychotic, alcoholic, and volatile. The news concerned David and Kathy's parents. Kathy told everyone she was marrying next month, and wanted just David, and not me. I kind of expected it and was pleased she hadn't invited me because it saved me time coming up with an excuse. My spouse didn't attend the wedding because he was unhappy that his sister invited him and not me. Those who attended their wedding afterward described it as a nightmare. Kathy and James were drunk during the ceremony and couldn't repeat the priest's words. James kept drinking at the reception and became blackout drunk, ripping up his shirt and slacks as everyone gazed in terror. Due to his schizophrenia, James attacked an innocent bystander who was glancing at a server at the event, claiming that it looked strange and was hiding something. James' family soothed him and paid off the server to drop accusations. Everyone was traumatized by this episode and worried about Kathy's safety. What was the guarantee that James would not assault her if he could attack a stranger? David and his parents tried to talk to Kathy discreetly about her husband's unusual conduct, but Kathy believed she could fix him. Even though her parents warned her about the red signs, she was sure James would. Over time. David and his parents tried to reach Kathy, but James would willfully keep her from talking to anyone. We couldn't sue him since Kathy wouldn't accept help. We heard that neighbors phoned police twice because they could hear them arguing and fighting. Kathy was unwavering in her belief that he was her match. 4 years ago, I became pregnant with Tom. Everyone was ecstatic. We invited Kathy to my baby shower. We concerned because she never responded, so David drove to her house to check on her. James had broken off all touch with her and thrown away our invitation so she wouldn't know. Who knows what happened, but David was furious. So he and James had a few heated words that didn't go anywhere because Kathy didn't think her husband was wrong. David departed in frustration, and we never heard from her again. We never contacted her again, even after Tom was born. Her parents also ceased trying to persuade her. Everyone prayed she would be okay. The years after Tom's birth were quiet and full of love. David and I never had serious issues. Now we have a great marriage rhythm and understanding. Tom is interested and keeps us occupied with his antics. David's parents babysit every weekend while David and I enjoy our weekly date night. It lets the grandparents spend time with Tom while we relax. It was well until 8 months ago, when Kathy arrived at our doorstep filthy and untidy. She was shoeless and had unclean feet. We allowed her in immediately, and I ran to get her a blanket because she was cold. Since we hadn't seen her in years, we didn't know what to say. David stroked her hair and asked if she was okay. Kathy was motionless and staring at nothing. She later told us she had miscarried. We sat in disbelief as she told us she became pregnant a month earlier and believed James would be thrilled. He was initially, but over the weeks he became concerned that this kid would take her away from him and make her love him less. He threatened to mix rat poison in her meals to make her lose the child during their fights. Kathy said she woke up feeling uneasy and went to the clinic to learn she had lost her child. She opted to walk home because she was too unwell and numb to drive. A brain guided her to our house, but she must have traveled 20 blocks or more barefoot. She forgot why she was barefoot. I took pity on her and hugged her. Once she registered the hug, she hugged me back. We sat for 5 minutes as Kathy gently cried into my arms. We immediately recognized this was her request for help. David was ready to face James, but I convinced him to call the police and tell their parents, who were better prepared. His parents were thrilled to have their daughter back and promised to support her always. The cops were as horrified as we were by Kathy's multiple marriage assaults and stayed quiet when they took her statement. James was arrested promptly despite protests and threats. He denied his role in her miscarriage till the end, but Kathy's discussions revealed that he poisoned her. Long story short, James' mental illness and inability to face trial. The judge sentenced him indefinitely to psychiatric care. It was annoying, but we were glad to have Kathy back safe and sound. I had lost all resentment toward her by now. As a woman, I felt awful for her and wanted to forget our past to move forward. After all this, I just wanted Kathy to heal. She looked calmer and less hostile around me. To speed her recovery, we introduced Tom when she was ready. She became very close to Tom quickly, which we didn't mind. My first red signal should have been this. She would surprise us at home without calling to spend extra time with my son throughout the weeks. She could drive over because she was staying with David's folks. She insisted on bathing Tom and reading him bedtime stories, which seemed kind. However, her growing presence seemed odd. Kathy started coming over unannounced practically daily, and always justify staying longer. To be active in Tom's daily life, she brought toys and gifts. She also made bizarre comments about his attire and hairstyle, telling me Tom would look better this way, or that way, which worried me. I admired her efforts to bond with him, but I felt like she was steadily undermining me again. Instead of her sibling, it was my son, and my mama bear instinct kicked in. David told me maybe I was overthinking and his sister was just coping with her misery. I felt horrible when he told me she had just lost her child, so I let her be. If caring for my son made her happy for a moment, what's the harm? As time went on, I tried to accommodate her continual presence in our home. She watched Tom every day at work and took him to the park in the evening. I sometimes noticed that my son was less enthusiastic about me when I returned home. He looked at me attentively and never ran to greet me. After Kathy left, I tried to chat to Tom about the day and if Kathy was bothering him, but he didn't participate. My always joyful son seemed gloomy and less eager. As his mother, I was worried about his behavior change, but my husband kindly told me I was thinking too much about unimportant things whenever I tried to talk to him about it. David tried to convince me that was all in my brain and Tom was just growing up. I kept having a nagging sensation, so I told one of my coworkers. He suggested I buy nanny cameras from Amazon and set them in my son's room in our living room to watch Tom. I bought 2 cameras immediately after this brilliant suggestion. David never knew about this since I didn't want him to ignore my sentiments again. I checked my nanny cams yesterday after Tom went to bed. David was watching TV downstairs, so I watched the audio video in my study area. Kathy initially cared for and played with Tom. She seemed great with kids. However, I was surprised when Kathy pulled a book from her purse. We usually read our son age-appropriate stories in his room, but this one was different. She read the book to Tom before his afternoon nap. While listening to her read the narrative, I realized it was about adoption and how a mother may give up her child for care. Kathy kept reading the narrative to my son, explaining that she left Tom in my care years ago because she wasn't ready. I gasped as she told my child that she will always be his mother and that no one can love him more. She kissed his forehead and let him slumber. My hands shook in anger when I realized what she had been giving my son for God knows how long, which had made him act strangely around me. This poor child must be bewildered and unsure what to believe. I was about to storm downstairs and ask my husband to never let his sister in again, but something stopped me. Instead, I took the day off to spend time with my son and find out what Kathy has been teaching him to brainwash him. When I informed Kathy today that she didn't have to babysit my son, she freaked out and said she loved him. But I told her to back off and that I wanted the day with him. I told David I was fine but needed a break when he asked. Then I took my son to his favorite park to play all day. We ate pizza and laughed all day. Before having the conversation, I wanted my son to feel safe with me. He quieted down when I asked him about his aunt and him. I assured Tom he was safe and wanted him to know he could talk to me about anything. My son told the truth. He told me Kathy had been trying for weeks to convince him she was his mother, even though he didn't believe it. She also told him I would leave him because only true mothers love their kids. He was afraid to ask me about it because of her certainty that I would kick him out. He said he loved me and had no desire to live with Kathy. I felt sorry for him as I watched his tearful face after hearing those remarks. He seemed tiny and defenseless, unlike the happy, cheerful youngster I knew. Getting down to his level, I softly grasped his hands in mine and reassured him everything would be fine. We would overcome this together. Hugged him fiercely, bearing his anxieties and suffering. I felt like a loser for not protecting my son from this maniac. He had nothing to worry about because David and I will handle it. However, my kid told me David knew everything. He added, I questioned Papa and he knows about this but told me not to tell you. My heart sank when I discovered that my husband had protected his sister instead of our son, despite knowing what she was doing. Everything was known to him. I stopped letting my son near them. I didn't want my youngster feeling confused and scared about his mother. As his mother, I had to shield him. I drove home and packed the luggage fast. I told my parents I was coming over and that if David asked, we would say I missed them and wanted to spend time with them. Luckily, my parents are supportive and said yes right away. I've told my parents everything, and they're as startled as I am at what Kathy has been telling my son. David called me after returning home to an empty house, but I attempted to sound normal, telling him I needed a work vacation from us. He seemed inquisitive, but I promised to remain with my folks for a few days. My actions must have seemed unusual to him, but we rarely argue, so I believe he didn't mind. Conflicted right now. I have no idea what to do. How do I handle this? AITA for separating my son and me from my husband's psychotic sister. Wow, almost 600 comments on my post this morning. I can't believe so many Reddit users found my post. I used fictitious names in my story to avoid David's family discovering it's about him. To those who are shaming me in the comments for not talking to my husband first, I tell you that I would have talked to him had my son not told me that he had tried to talk to David when he first found out. Call it my mother's instinct. But the fact that my husband knew for weeks how differently my kid had been behaving with me but would gaslight me shows that a confrontation with him would have been fruitless. I wanted to remove my son immediately, and he's safer with my parents. All that important is that no lunatic can lie to him. Kathy has often contacted me, stating she needs to meet my son and missing him. At David's parents' house this weekend, I'll finish this forever. Since David's grandparents are visiting, I organized this get-together weeks in advance to spend time together. However, after recent events, I plan to speak my mind and ensure Kathy never again touches my son. I'm back with update 2. I confronted David and Kathy at their family reunion as planned. I was nervous, but I took the nanny cam to show everyone authentic proof. I called out Kathy in front of everyone during lunch. She seemed startled but tried to shrug it off. Then I showed her the nanny cam and told her I recorded what she told my son. She lost color as I sent the video to the family group chat so everyone could see what I was talking about. Her parents were appalled as she tried to convince my son she was his mother. I then confronted David about failing to protect our son. My husband seemed guilt-ridden but said he didn't think much of it and wanted to help his sister grieve. He chose not to tell me about his sister's recovery despite his conflicting feelings. I told him that his acts made me distrust him and could not let my son around him or his family again. I saw my spouse cry for the first time in a while, but I stuck to my resolve. I told him I couldn't raise my son in a family where his dad wouldn't defend him to protect his mentally ill sister. David and Kathy's parents and grandparents apologized and promised to keep Kathy away from our son. Kathy appeared mortified but never apologized. David kept rationalizing his behavior, but I ignored him. I departed soon after this confrontation because my task was done and I didn't want to see them again. Update 3. I plan to divorce my husband. I know some of you are confused. Many of you encouraged me to give my husband a second chance since this wasn't his fault, and David is a good man. A good man isn't necessarily a good father. Just because we never fought doesn't mean he was a wonderful parent to Tom. He should have caught this early when our son had suspicions instead of spending weeks covering it up and gaslighting me. My son and I no longer trust him. Kathy returned to my life after everything she went through because I felt terrible for her as a woman. But she proved why I never liked her. I know Kathy's abuse was horrible, but our son shouldn't pay for it. We believed the grown-ass woman with mental disorders had improved. I was astonished by my husband's. He should never be around Tom because he would put her mental health over our son's. He was usually a supportive spouse, and I trusted him, but after what occurred with Kathy, he plainly wanted to protect her more than us. Starting now, I will always safeguard my son. I can get complete custody of my son if I reveal his family background during the court battle.